Hey guys, tonight we drift gently into the watery heart of an empire, where tomatoes float, gardens don't touch land, and your morning chores involve balancing in a canoe while swatting at herons. This is Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital that glistens like a mirage above Lake Texcoco. But it's no illusion. Beneath the thin mist of dawn, between the reeds and rippling reflections, lies one of the most ingenious feats of human agriculture, the chinampas, floating gardens built with mud, magic, and perhaps a little controlled chaos. You squint as the rising sun casts golden lines across the lake. The water's surface blurs the line between dream and reality. If you step wrong, you're ankle-deep in silt. Step right, and you're feeding an empire. These gardens grow without soil as we know it. No tractors, no fences, not even a single raised bed from IKEA. Instead, a floating patchwork of islands seems to drift underfoot, lush and bursting with maize, beans, chili peppers, and the occasional duck feather. The air smells like wet earth, sweet blossoms, and whatever your neighbor, just overcooked 3 gardens down. Of course, you probably won't survive this. Not because the Aztecs were cruel, though they had their moments, but because balancing a basket of tomatoes while steering a canoe with your hip and also avoiding the sacred goose would have taken years of training. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love knowing who's drifting off where. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The boat rocks gently as you shift your weight. You're standing, well, swaying, on a wooden platform strapped to bundles of reeds. Around you, the lake stirs with pre-dawn life. You hear the first splash of someone checking their traps. The sound of distant chanting from a temple island carries across the water, mixed with a few surprisingly vocal frogs. You glance down, unsure whether the ground beneath you will stay put if you sneeze. Welcome to farming Aztec style. This floating city isn't fiction. In the 1400s, it was very real. Home to over 200,000 people, connected by causeways, aqueducts, and a sprawling labyrinth of canals. Tenochtitlan thrived in the middle of a shallow lake because instead of conquering nature, the Aztecs wove themselves into it. And it starts with the chinampa, part farm, part raft, all genius. This isn't just planting on a floaty. This is engineering with the patience of a monk and the creativity of a toddler in a mud puddle. You spot a man poling his canoe past you. In it, there's a small pig, 3 enormous gourds, and a sleepy dog who seems to be in charge. He nods and points at a patch of reeds near your feet. That's your plot now. Time to get dirty. The first thing you notice is how soft the air is. Here. Not quiet exactly, there's too much life for that, but soft. The kind of atmosphere where sound melts into stillness. Your fingers trail in the water. It's cool, silty, and smells a little like soup or pond salad. Hard to say. There's no dry land here. Not really. The Aztecs didn't drain the lake. They embraced it. Rather than force the earth to behave, they tricked it. They created long rectangular rafts from reeds and sticks, then loaded them with lakebed mud so rich it practically composts itself. The result? A floating platform that supports crops better than most backyard gardens. Historians still argue whether these gardens truly floated independently, or were more like semi-anchored plots extending from the lakebed. The reality is probably both. Some were free-floating at first, then rooted in place with trees. Others were built atop shallow water, reinforced until they became permanent features. Either way, the effect is mesmerizing. Farmland that ripples slightly when a canoe passes by. And let's talk about that lake. Lake Texcoco wasn't just a pretty backdrop. It was part of a delicate hydrological system that included brackish and freshwater zones. The chinampa zones were carefully placed to take advantage of the freshest water, ensuring their crops wouldn't taste like saltwater sadness. You notice an egret eyeing you from a low branch. It doesn't trust you. Neither does the frog hopping across your future garden with a self-important bounce. That's fair. You're the new guy. Your only tool is a paddle, a basket, and a vague sense that you might have been better off becoming a poet. Still, you kneel and press your hands into the woven mat. It's firmer than you expected, with just enough give to remind you that below lies water, and below that, a rich, ancient muck full of mystery, mosquito larvae, and the occasional sacrificial bead from long ago. Your journey into the world of Aztec agriculture has just begun, and so far, you've only gotten your knees wet. You lean forward and squint at your soon-to-be chinampa, your very own floating farm, if you can manage not to fall in before breakfast. It looks like a giant, soggy lasagna of twigs, reeds, and wishful thinking. But there's a method to this watery madness. First, you need to gather the ingredients. Reeds, long, strong, and probably already occupied by a few water bugs, get pulled from the shore. You bundle them together like wet spaghetti, crisscrossing them to form the foundation. If you had access to hardware stores or duct tape, this might go faster, but in 15th century Tenochtitlan, you're relying on your hands, your back, and a rope made from agave fibers that smells vaguely like tequila and regret. The chinampa isn't a raft, not exactly. It's more like a series of flat, tightly bound, reed bundles lashed together over time, heavy enough to sink slightly, dense enough to stay mostly above water. You're not building it to float forever. You're building it so that eventually it forgets it was ever water. You paddle to a nearby stand of ahuejote trees, those tall, wispy willows with roots that spread like nosy neighbors. You cut a few saplings and carefully plant them along the corners of your structure. These aren't for decoration. As they grow, their roots will weave into the raft and the lakebed below, anchoring the chinampa so it doesn't drift into someone else's squash patch during a windstorm. Historians still argue whether these trees were chosen for their symbolic significance or simply because they were available and good at holding soil. Either way, they become the guardians of your garden, growing tall and bending like old dancers when the wind stirs. Back on your raft, you start layering. First, branches, thick ones, then thinner. They crisscross like an anxious spiderweb. Then come reeds, laid down like mats. Over that, muck. You haul it up from the lakebed, black and gooey and smelling faintly like pickled algae. It slops into place with a satisfying splat. You layer it again and again, sticks, mud, more reeds, more mud, until you start to see something that vaguely resembles land. It's slow work, and every splash of muck on your skin feels like nature giving you a damp slap. Your muscles ache, your feet have disappeared into something mushy, and your paddle now contains more lake gunk than wood. Still, bit by bit, you watch your chinampa grow. With each layer, the weight increases. The structure sinks slightly, but not too much. It hugs the water's surface, like a lily pad dreaming of becoming a peninsula. You take a break and sit at the edge. A canoe glides by, loaded with maize husks, and a child who seems to be eating half the produce. The woman poling, it probably his mother, smiles at you and gestures approval. Your chinampa might be small, but it's alive now. As the sun climbs higher, the reeds around you rustle with lizards and unseen birds. The lake itself feels like a quiet co-conspirator, soft, giving, always whispering at the edges of things. The air smells warm and green. You glance at the shoreline. It's distant, but dotted with other chinampas in various stages of assembly. You're not alone. Hundreds, maybe thousands of these floating gardens drift, or pretend to drift, all across the southern lake. This is more than farming. It's a system, an ecosystem. A floating neighborhood where your zucchini might exchange pollen with your neighbor's beans in a midnight breeze. There's a certain peaceful absurdity to it. You, a person with zero prior experience in raft construction, now own a rectangle of lake mud that might feed a city. You are a farmer, a boat captain, and a part-time duck deterrent, all in one. And you haven't even planted anything yet. You try to stand, stretch, and promptly sit back down as your left foot squelches deeper than expected. Clearly, the chinampa isn't done deciding whether it's a raft or a garden. You pat the ground reassuringly. You'll get there, you whisper, half to it, half to yourself. The sky above starts to fade toward late afternoon. Sunlight glints off the water, reflecting the jagged lines of reed bundles and the soft swaying of the willow saplings. This isn't just manual labor. It's land art, performance farming, Aztec hydroponics with a flair for drama. You lie back, your head resting on a cool bundle of reeds. A dragonfly buzzes past, unbothered. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing, something low and rhythmic, probably about maize or rain or a really good chili sauce. And you breathe in, deep, slow, with that muddy perfume of wet earth and ambition. Your body aches in every useful place. Your hands are blistered, your legs are sunburned, and your garden is finally afloat. Welcome to the chinampa life. You wake the next morning with a reed imprint on your cheek and the distinct sensation that your back has entered its new normal. Stretching on a surface that's only slightly more stable than a wet sponge, you push yourself upright, pat your semi-solid chinampa like an old dog, and get back to work. Today's task? Anchoring your island for good. If yesterday was mudcake sculpting, today is the delicate art of nature's zip ties. Willow roots. The awahote trees you planted around the perimeter are still saplings, but their mission is clear. Grow fast, grip hard, and don't let your hard-earned garden float away. You prod one gently. It leans at an unhelpful angle, like a tipsy uncle at a wedding. That's fine, for now. But eventually, these trees will weave their roots into the lakebed and the body of the chinampa, turning this soft slosh of reeds and mud into a surprisingly stable agricultural platform. The willow wasn't chosen at random. It loves water, grows like gossip in a village square, and stabilizes everything around it. Plus, it offers shade and a home for friendly creatures like frogs, birds, and that one snake you pretend not to see. Historians still argue whether the tree's role in anchoring chinampas was fully understood scientifically or just observed and ritualized over time. Either way, your survival as a floating gardener depends on these leafy anchors digging in, and fast. Without them, your crop bed could drift, split, or even flip over like a particularly passive-aggressive pancake. You start reinforcing the corners. You lash the tree bases with more reeds and mud, packing in the gaps with soft clay and lake detritus. It's not elegant, but it holds. You see another farmer across the canal driving a wooden stake deep beside his sapling. You copy him, only slightly less gracefully, and jab your own stake into the chinampa edge with a dull thunk. Progress. You pause for water, watching as dragonflies skim the canal like tiny helicopters. Overhead, a heron flaps lazily across, the sky uninterested in your toil. The world here moves slowly. Even the plants seem to take their time, growing in swaying rhythm with the lake's breeze. To the west, you hear the muffled thud of a drumbeat, some kind of ceremony, or maybe just a very committed gardener trying to scare off ducks. Either way, it's a reminder that this place isn't just utilitarian, it's spiritual too. Every plant, every patch of earth, or mud impersonating earth, is part of a cosmic map. The Aztecs didn't see farming and religion as separate domains. In their worldview, the gods had handed them this watery Eden to cultivate and protect. And your little chinampa? It's more than a vegetable plot. It's a tribute. A tiny floating altar to the gods of growth, rain, and the occasional corn-based miracle. You dig your fingers into the mud near one of the willow bases and feel it. Resistance. A root, soft but determined, threads its way downward. A smile creeps across your face. It's working. slowly, gently, naturally. Nearby, a child skips across another chinampa, perfectly balanced on the squishiest of ground, scattering ducks and shouting something about missing corn. You envy her balance, and maybe her snack. You return to your own corner, setting more tree cuttings, firming the reed bundles, even weaving in a few extra branches for good measure. This is the anchoring phase, the part no one writes poetry about. But without it, the whole endeavor would be floating somewhere near disaster. You start thinking of your chinampa as a living thing, not just in terms of what grows on it, but what it's made of. Mud, trees, reeds, water, effort, and probably a dash of personal sacrifice from your sore thighs. You hum a little tune, part lullaby, part self-defense mechanism against existential dread. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows over the lake, you notice something heartening. The edges of your chinampa don't shift as much anymore. The willows sway, yes, but they hold. The corners stay tight. It's beginning to feel like a real piece of land, even if it still gurgles when you walk too fast. And just as you're packing up your tools, a boat glides by with an elderly woman in the bow. She eyes your handiwork, nods once, and continues, on without a word. You don't need her approval, but it feels like a gold star just the same. Back on the reed mat you call a bed, you stretch out again, hands caked in dry mud, the sky now scattered with stars. The lake hushes to a murmur, frogs beginning their nighttime chorus. The willows creak ever so slightly in the wind, like sleepy sentinels guarding your floating world. And you sleep, finally, on something not quite land, not quite raft, but entirely yours. Morning arrives not with a rooster, but with the wet slap of a fishtail somewhere nearby and the gossiping calls of herons. You sit up slowly, surrounded by mist that drapes itself like a sleepy blanket over the lake. The chinampa beneath you holds steady. The willow saplings whisper in the breeze like they've always lived here. You've made a solid beginning, but the real magic of the floating gardens lies below. You grab a shallow wooden scoop and slide into your canoe with the grace of someone who's still slightly damp from yesterday. The goal today is simple in theory, messy in practice. You're going dredging. You're going to gather the rich, dark muck from the lake bottom, Aztec gold, minus the glitter, and haul it up to feed your garden. You paddle out a little ways, to a spot known among locals for its particularly nutritious sludge. The trick, you're told, is to not fall in. It's a trick you repeat to yourself often, like a muddy mantra. You anchor your canoe with a small stone and lean over, scooping down into the water. The lake responds with a soft blub, followed by a squelchy resistance as your scoop hits the sediment. This muck, known as a tlaliatl in Nahuatl, is thick with organic matter. Rotting reeds, fish waste, decomposed leaves, old offerings from 100 years ago. It smells earthy, a bit fishy, and, oddly enough, a little sweet. Not in a bakery way, more like compost's final perfume. You sling the first scoop onto your chinampa. It lands with a satisfying thwack. You do it again, and again, and again, until your arms start to feel like overcooked beans and your knees threaten to file a formal complaint. Aztec farmers did this regularly. The dredging wasn't just about fertilizing, it was part of the cycle. The lake gave, and you gave back by not letting it stagnate. Historians still debate how systematically this was done, whether there was an organized lakebed rotation, or more of a free-for-all grab-what-you-can approach. But one thing's clear. The practice sustained Tenochtitlan's immense population, without chemical fertilizers, warehouses, or modern logistics. You return to your chinampa with your bounty. Now comes the messy part. You spread the lake mud over the top layer, blending it with the reeds and clay like a baker frosting a particularly questionable cake. The mud is dense but not heavy, strangely buoyant, like it's got ambition, You work? A turtle eyes you from a patch of lilies, unimpressed. Maybe it's seen better mud. You pause to watch an older farmer across the canal. His chinampa is a masterpiece. Broad rows of maize, bright red chilies dangling from stakes, and amaranth flowers bobbing in the breeze. His movements are practiced, almost dance-like. He doesn't shovel, he glides. You, on the other hand, are wearing more mud than you're applying. Still, your garden begins to transform. The added muck darkens the surface, enriching it visibly. It gleams in the sun, not unlike wet chocolate cake, though you wouldn't recommend tasting it unless you're into plankton. You decide to add a few layers, some dry reeds, some ash from your neighbor's cooking fire, with permission, of course, and a sprinkling of crushed bones you found in a traded pouch labeled, "Good for squash." Whether that's scientifically valid or superstition dressed up as gardening advice, well, historians argue about that too. There's something sacred in the layering. You aren't just piling dirt. You're creating strata, each one a different story. Yesterday's fish bones, last week's ash, today's sweat. All of it feeding tomorrow's maize, and you're not alone in this rhythm. The lake is full of others doing the same. Distant voices echo over water. Someone's singing, someone's arguing. A child shrieks joyfully as they dump something, possibly a frog, onto a chinampa edge. You settle into a steady motion, spreading, patting, smoothing. The soil responds well. It holds its shape, stays damp, and doesn't sink. It even smells nicer now. You think you catch a whiff of sage, though it could just be the neighbor burning something mildly magical again. As the day wears on, your chinampa transforms from a soggy mat into something with promise, real promise. The kind that says, hey, in a few weeks, I could be feeding your entire canoe club. And just as you're wiping the last bit of sludge from your forearms with a handful of damp reeds, a dragonfly lands on your knee. It stays there, wings shimmering, completely unbothered by your smell, your sweat, or your reputation as a rookie farmer. A silent nod of approval, perhaps. You look around. The willows are still. The lake sparkles under the setting sun. Your chinampa no longer squishes underfoot. It holds. You breathe in the scent of wet earth, roasted corn from somewhere nearby, and that ever-present trace of lake water mystery. Tomorrow, you'll plant. Dawn again. The lake is quiet, as if holding its breath. You wake to the scent of damp earth and last night's ash. Someone was definitely celebrating something, possibly the successful delivery of a watermelon. You stretch on your chinampa, which now feels less like a raft and more like a mattress that forgot it's made of mud. It holds your weight without complaint, the willow saplings swaying gently above you. Today, it's time to build the real soul of your garden, the soil sandwich. The chinampa's surface still needs layering. Yesterday's dredged mud gave it a belly full of nutrients, but Aztec gardening doesn't stop at good enough. You need to transform this muddy platform into a gourmet buffet for crops that expect to grow like it's their birthright. You start with ash. Not just any ash, volcanic ash, gritty and oddly soft at the same time. It's traded from villages near the twin volcanoes, Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl, whose names sound like thunder and love songs depending on who says them. The ash improves drainage, adds trace minerals, and possibly wards off evil squash spirits, depending on which neighbor you ask. You sprinkle it carefully over the damp muck like seasoning. Not too much. You're not making soup. You're building layers. Dense, spongy, complex. One local grandmother describes it as feeding the garden a thoughtful meal, not stuffing it like a festival pig. Next comes compost. You scoop it from a basket that's been fermenting joyfully for weeks. It's full of kitchen scraps, old maize husks, broken pottery bits for good luck, and a mysterious banana-like fruit that may have been a prank. It smells potent, but the soil loves it. Worms wriggle through the mix, which is always a good sign unless you're squeamish. You kneel and press the compost gently into the mud. Not just dumping. It's more like tucking it in, like you're laying a blanket over sleeping roots that haven't even been born yet. Then you add more dredged mud, another scoop, then reeds, then more ash. You alternate like a lasagna with zero cheese and too many earthworms. Each layer compresses slightly, helping stabilize the surface and hold in moisture. It's low-tech, high-magic soil engineering, perfected over centuries by people who didn't need blueprints to understand balance. Historians still argue whether the layering process was done ritualistically or simply by instinct. Some sources mention prayers sung between layers. Others suggest it was just a method passed down by observation, trial, and whatever wisdom comes from stepping in too much goose poop. Either way, your chinampa is becoming a masterpiece of layered fertility. You press your hands into it. It's warm from the sun, but moist and cool beneath the surface. Perfect. You take a break. A boy floats past on a canoe with bundles of sage and what looks suspiciously like a stuffed badger. He waves. You wave back. The lake is alive with sound now. Croaking frogs, flapping ducks, the distant murmur of people trading in Tenochtitlan's market. You reflect for a moment. In most places, soil is something you inherit. You work with what the land gives you. But here, you build the land itself. You construct your soil, craft it with intention and layers, give it personality. It's like making a bed and hoping plants find it comfortable enough to thrive. Then come the fringe touches. You tuck chili stems into the corners, not for growing, but for warding off pests. You stir in powdered lime, rumored to keep away the beetles. A friend offers a dried gourd charm tied with a human hair. You politely bury it near the beans. Because, while this is farming, it's also folk magic. Ritual. An everyday spell whispered into mud and mulch. You catch yourself humming a little song you didn't realize you knew, passed to you in a half-remembered lullaby from the woman who gave you the compost. By now, the chinampa's surface feels rich, dark, almost springy. You press your heel into it. It holds, then gives. Just enough. You imagine roots taking hold. Soon, very soon. The willows creak gently overhead, birds dipping low across your field like feathered inspectors. Somewhere, a flute plays. Slow, sweet, and slightly off-key. You don't care. The garden listens. You've layered mud, ash, compost, and reeds. You've mixed science and belief, effort and instinct. You step back, carefully, and admire what you've built. It's not a raft anymore. Not quite land, not quite lake. It's something else entirely. It's ready. Tomorrow, you'll plant your first seeds. You rise with a quiet sense of purpose, part anticipation, part muscle ache. The chinampa beneath you, once wobbly as a soup plate in a canoe, now feels like the beginning of something stable. You stretch, shake the stiffness from your shoulders, and glance across the still surface of the canal. The water's mirror glows gold with sunrise. Today is planting day. But before you place a single seed in the soil, you must navigate the arteries of this floating world, the canals. You climb into your canoe, which creaks like an old friend complaining about a short night's sleep. You push off, your paddle slicing cleanly through the water. This isn't just a commute. It's part of the agricultural system itself. The canals aren't simply gaps between chinampas. They're vital. They allow water to circulate, people to move, goods to travel, and most importantly, crops to drink. You paddle slowly, passing rows of floating gardens like green shelves in an open-air library. Some chinampas are stacked with maize plants already waist-high. Others gleam with bright peppers or the fuzzy green heads of amaranth, and still others shimmer with nothing but damp soil, waiting patiently like yours. Every so often, someone paddles past you. A woman balancing a pot of something steaming. a boy with a fishing net, and the kind of confidence that only comes from falling in the canal at least twice and surviving both times. The traffic is quiet, courteous, gliding on water as soft as breath. You reach a larger chinampa, the community source for seed swapping, plant gossip, and unsolicited farming advice. It's run by two sisters who seem to communicate entirely through eyebrow movement. You greet them, and they silently offer you a bundle of maize seeds wrapped in a woven pouch and a smile so faint it may be ceremonial. The maize is ancient, figuratively and literally. This isn't your store-bought corn. These kernels are tougher, richer in color, and hum with history. You trade a small pouch of dried herbs and 3 duck feathers, premium currency in this ecosystem. You paddle back, your cargo cradled in your lap like treasure. And it is. These canals once carried everything from produce to warriors, from offerings to rumors. The lake, in all its shimmering tranquility, hides the logistical backbone of an empire. Historians still debate whether the Aztecs had a regulated system of canal maintenance, or if it was managed informally by community habit and mutual necessity. Given how smoothly the traffic flows, you suspect it's a little of both, part divine order, part neighborly peer pressure. You return to your chinampa and step out, balancing carefully. The soil is ready. You open the seed pouch. Inside are maize kernels like polished teeth, white, blue, even a deep purple. Each one is a promise, a potential stalk whispering of tortillas yet to be born. You begin planting. There's a rhythm to it. Press a hole, drop a seed, cover it, hum a little nonsense lullaby. You plant in rows, leaving space for the beans and squash to come later. The 3 sisters, maize, beans, and squash, grow best together. Maize shoots up tall, offering a living pole. Beans climb the stalks, feeding the soil with nitrogen. Squash sprawls low, shading the ground, keeping moisture in and weeds out. It's a system older than the empire that wields it, a co-op of crops, each doing their job without complaint or HR meetings. You marvel at how they were planted together, not just because it was efficient, but because it worked, biologically, practically, even poetically. You finish the maize, then gently press in beans and nestle squash seeds near the edges. The chinampa feels different now, like it's accepted your offering. You sit back on your heels and survey your rows, not quite straight, but enthusiastically hopeful. Overhead, a heron cries, possibly in critique. You gather your tools and rinse your hands in the canal. A breeze picks up, rustling the young willows. The sun climbs higher, glittering off the water. The world feels alive with promise. You're not just growing food, you're participating in a dance thousands of years in the making. Tomorrow you'll wait, and water, and maybe whisper encouraging words to your maize babies. It's how things are done here. You wake to birdsong that sounds vaguely judgmental, as if the egrets have strong opinions about your planting rows. The maize seeds are tucked safely beneath the surface, along with the beans and squash. And now, you wait. But this isn't idle time. The chinampa doesn't rest, and neither do you. You roll onto your side, brush a reed off your cheek, and stretch your legs into the early sun. The garden glistens with dew, and something has already been nibbling at the edge of your squash patch, probably a duck, possibly a relative of yesterday's suspicious turtle. You rise and inspect. Nothing too bad, just a few pecks here and there. But it's a reminder. This place is rich and alive, and full of things with opinions about your vegetables. You grab a wooden paddle and start carving small canals with it between your planting rows. These narrow furrows help direct water from the main channel into the soil, letting moisture seep in gently rather than flood the roots. It's part art, part science, and part hoping the water knows where it's going. Aztec farmers had a knack for this. They knew how to read the lake like a calendar. When to dig, when to deepen, when to redirect. They used thin sticks to measure levels and knew how much evaporation the maize could handle in a dry spell. One was a hydrological ballet, and you're learning the steps one squishy boot print at a time. You hop into your canoe and paddle around your chinampa, inspecting the edges. A few spots look too damp, sinking slightly. You fix this by adding more reeds and clay, patting it down like frosting a wobbly cake. The soil needs to be damp, not drowning. There's a fine line between fertile and, help, my beans are floating. As you move, you notice another farmer across the canal sprinkling something along his garden's edge. You paddle closer. He's spreading crushed eggshells. Pest control, he says. Slugs hate it. You make a mental note to start bartering for breakfast refuse. Your canoe isn't just a means of transport. It's your watering can, your wheelbarrow, your picnic bench. You keep tools stashed inside, a scoop, a small basket of mulch, a bag of chili pepper powder that you may or may not be using as psychological warfare against overly curious ducks. You pause to take in the view. Your chinampa, now striped with tiny canals and lined with baby willow trees, looks like it belongs here. It's no longer a guest at the lake's table. It's family. As you paddle a bit farther out, you notice rows upon rows of chinampas in various stages of life, some young and wild with new shoots, others carefully cultivated into neat squares of green precision. This isn't just farming, it's city building with corn. Tenochtitlan, just to the north, relies on these chinampas. With no room for fields inside the city, the floating gardens are its lifeline. Crops are paddled in daily, fresh, local, and in quantities that make you reconsider the phrase, farm to table. It's more like farm to canoe to ceremonial feast to mildly satisfied gods. Historians note how this system supported one of the largest cities in the world at the time. Some estimates say Tenochtitlan rivaled, even surpassed, European capitals in size and cleanliness. All thanks to you and your muddy floating neighbors. You return to your garden and notice something new. Tiny green shoots poking from the soil. The maize is waking up. You squat down, gently brushing soil aside to admire the curling stem. It's pale, almost shy, and looks entirely unequipped for the challenges ahead. Still, it's here. You whisper to it like it's a baby animal. A very important one. You give your garden a final watering, dipping a gourd into the canal and gently trickling. Water at the base of each row, not too much. Just enough to whisper, I believe in you. The sun is higher now, and the lake smells like sun-warmed mud and something faintly floral. You lean back against a pile of reeds, hands behind your head, and exhale. This is the rhythm. Now, you water, you wait, you patrol for ducks, you tell your maize it's doing great, your garden listens. It always does. The days begin to blur into one another. Sunrise, water, mud, sun, repeat. But the chinampa thrives. You start to measure time by leaf size and bean tendril behavior. The maize has grown tall enough to whisper when the wind picks up, and the squash is beginning to stretch lazily along the edges like a cat finding its sunbeam. You, meanwhile, are learning the art of waiting without doing nothing. This morning, you sit cross-legged under the shade of a young willow, watching the garden for signs of mischief. That nibble on your squash leaves? Could have been a duck. Could have been your neighbor's child, testing the edibility of raw vegetables. But you're not here to accuse. You're here to listen. The gossip today is good. On the chinampa next to yours, two elderly farmers argue quietly about whether their chili plants are thriving because of moonlight rituals or because one of them secretly added fish guts to the soil. You nod politely as you pass, caught in the wake of a serious agricultural debate disguised as small talk. You pause at the edge of the canal where an old man is scraping something into a pot. It's fermented. Maize mash, possibly for eating, possibly for trading, possibly for summoning rain. You never really know. He grins and offers you a taste. You decline with grace, It smells like socks dipped in vinegar, but you appreciate the gesture. You paddle down a narrow canal to visit the communal tool cache. It's nothing fancy, just a floating platform with a few baskets, reed scoops, and a long-handled claw that could probably double as a monster puppet in a children's festival. You borrow it anyway. Your beans are tangled, and you suspect someone's gourd vine is trespassing. Politely, of course. As you drift past another chinampa, you hear singing, soft, rhythmic, and oddly catchy. A woman is planting flowers around, her beanstalks. Not for beauty, she explains, but to keep away moths. The marigolds act as guardians, she says, like tiny sun-colored warriors. You return to your own garden and look closer. It's alive in ways that go beyond chlorophyll. There are ants conducting mysterious business at the base of a maize stalk. A snail slowly ascends a squash leaf, possibly on a vision quest. You even spot a hummingbird sipping from a wild blossom. You don't remember planting. But then again, the wind and birds are excellent, if chaotic landscapers. Historians still debate whether the more mystical aspects of Aztec gardening, like singing to plants or burying obsidian chips under tomato roots, were widely practiced or reserved for certain priestly roles. But here, now, it all blurs. Everything is part of the cycle. Every chant, every accidental gourd theft, every whispered wish into the soil. You find yourself humming again. The same nonsense tune from earlier, the one you can't place. Maybe it's something your neighbor sang. Maybe it's something the wind planted in your ear. You set to work disentangling your beans, guiding them up maize stalks that now stand proud and leafy. It's slow, gentle labor. No rushing, just small nudges and whispered encouragement. A squash leaf slaps your hand, playfully covered in dew. You pat it back. The canal water glistens beside you, catching the light like it's been dusted with stars. You dip your hand in and splash a bit on your face. Cool, earthy, vaguely fishy. It's better than most spa treatments. You pause and let your hand float just below the surface. You feel the lake breathe. This whole place is held together by things that don't speak. Mud, water, roots, birdsong. And yet, the entire floating city hums with language. Every chinampa tells a story. Some are full of peppers and pride. Others lean into mystery and mushrooms. Yours? Yours is still writing itself, but it has strong characters. The overconfident squash, the anxious beans, the maize that insists on growing taller than your neighbors just out of spite. You gather a small handful of herbs from the edges, epizote perhaps, and a few stalks of something that smells like pepper and citrus had an unusually complicated child. You crush a few leaves in your fingers, inhale, and feel a wave of something. Calm, clarity, maybe just nostalgia for a place you're still living in. A dragonfly lands on your maize, and for a moment, everything is still. You don't speak. The garden doesn't answer. But you're both listening. You squat at the edge of your chinampa, elbows resting on your knees, watching a small army of ducks waddle with confidence across a nearby patch of squash. They're not yours, but they've clearly appointed themselves as pest control for the entire canal. One of them quacks loudly, like it's issuing a decree. And honestly, it kind of is. You've heard the rumors. Ducks are more than adorable waddle machines. They eat insects, aerate the soil, and leave behind a trail of surprisingly useful droppings. The Aztecs didn't just tolerate these feathery freeloaders. They invited them. Today, you decide to make it official. You paddle down the canal to a family that raises ducks, not just for eggs and meat, but for their unique contributions to agriculture. You trade a bundle of amaranth leaves, a laughably crooked gourd, and a riddle you only partly understand for 3 ducks and a small bag of snail shells, a bonus, they say, for flavoring the soil. Don't ask. Back on your chinampa, the ducks step out of the canoe like they own the place, One waddles directly into your bean patch and starts pecking at something invisible. Another takes a dip in your smallest canal trench, flapping joyfully. The third looks you straight in the eye and sits down as if to say, "We're here." You may proceed. You name them, probably unwisely. The large one is Chief Quack. The sleek one is Pedo Supreme. The third you name Feather McMudfeet, mostly because he's already covered in both. The ducks get to work. They patrol the perimeter, hunting bugs and snails with uncanny efficiency. It's oddly relaxing to watch. Nature's little vacuum cleaners, puffed up and self-important. You check on the crops while they waddle. Your maize is almost waist-high now, and the beans have started their upward spiral. The squash is trying to annex a corner of the chinampa you hadn't even designated for planting. You let it. At this point, it's earned the right. Then, as you clear a bit of overgrowth, you spot a small nest tucked into the reeds at the far edge of your plot. Inside are tiny eggs, barely larger than marbles. Not duck eggs. Something wilder. You step back quietly, unwilling to disturb the surprised tenant. This isn't unusual. Chinampas aren't just gardens, they're ecosystems. You share this patch, a floating earth with ducks, turtles, frogs, insects, birds, and at least one snake who thinks he's being subtle. You plant food, they maintain balance. It's a deal you didn't sign, but are now happily bound to. Historians still argue whether the integration of animals like ducks into chinampa life was intentional design or happy accident. Either way, the symbiosis is clear. Ducks keep pests down. Their droppings fertilize the soil. Their splashing discourages mosquitoes. And they're amusing to watch, which is not historically relevant, but emotionally vital. You build a little reed fence, not to trap the ducks, just to guide them. They ignore it, of course. Ducks are independent thinkers. You place a shallow bowl of water near the crops. They splash in it. You try to scatter some food scraps as a thank you. They snub them and go right back to your compost pile. You take a moment to sit and watch. The sun is high, casting shimmering reflections across the water. A breeze stirs the maize leaves. Your chinampa smells like green things, duck feathers, and potential. Chief Quack waddles up and pecks at your sandal. A compliment, probably. You lean back on your elbows, listening to the gentle rustle of bean vines, the quiet splashes, and the occasional far-off flute from another farmer who's clearly serenading his tomatoes again. This isn't just gardening, it's choreography. And the ducks, they're doing the moonwalk. You laugh quietly and close your eyes for a moment. The chinampa rocks gently beneath you, the kind of motion that says, yes, everything is growing. Midday sun filters through the willows, casting dappled patterns across your chinampa like nature's version of polka dots. Your ducks have taken a union break, lounging in a shaded trench with their bellies half in the water, beaks slightly open in what looks suspiciously like smug contentment. It's quiet, serene even. A perfect moment for a little cosmic alignment. You stand at the edge of your floating garden and squint toward the east. Not for aesthetics. You're trying to line up your planting rows, maize, beans, and squash, with something a bit loftier. The stars. Or at least, their earthly analogs. Aztec agriculture wasn't just about mud and muck. It was also about rhythm, specifically, the rhythm of the universe. The position of the sun, the phases of the moon, even Venus's brief but dramatic appearances, were all woven into planting schedules. You've heard the whispers, old farmers who won't plant unless the maize seeds are kissed by the first full moon after Tlacaxi-Pehualistli, the festival of flayed skin and crop renewal. Yes, it's as unsettling as it sounds, but they insist it helps germination. So today, you test this cosmic approach. You pull out a piece of bark with a crude grid, etched into it, gifted to you by the same old man who fed you the vinegar sock mash. It's a simplified calendar, aligned with the Aztec Tonalpohualli, a 260-day ritual cycle that governed everything from corn planting to naming your child after a jaguar or a lizard. According to the markings, today is a good day for grounding, energy, earth-based growth, root vegetables, calming prayers, and probably slow, non-argumentative bean planting. You begin walking your chinampa's length, adjusting rows just slightly to mirror east-west lines. The logic is partly agricultural, maximizing sun exposure, but it's also spiritual. By aligning with the heavens, you're showing the gods that your garden listens. Some historians debate whether this alignment was consistently practiced or only used in ceremonial gardens, like those dedicated to Tlaloc, the rain god, or Xochiquetzal, the goddess of flowers, fertility, and fabulous hair. Still, even your neighbors seem to casually reference star positions when they discuss late bloomers and bean behavior. You draw new furrows with a long stick, dragging it slowly through the soil while humming a song you now realize is about rain. And otters. The melody helps. So does the rhythm. The soil parts easily, moist, dark, and rich with yesterday's duck fertilizer. You reach into your seed pouch again, not maize this time, but chili seeds, gifted by the marigold woman. You plant them along the southern edge, murmuring thanks as you do. Chilies are tricksters. They grow where they please, burn where they want, and laugh in the face of gentle flavor. But if planted on the right day, with the right stars, they're known to produce fruits that can chase away colds, curses, and clingy exes. As you plant, a breeze picks up. It whispers through the willows, stirring the maize leaves into a soft shush, like the garden is telling you a secret it hasn't quite finished translating. You look up. A flock of birds passes overhead in a V that breaks and reforms. Somewhere far off, a drumbeat pulses, slow, ceremonial. Someone is dancing for Tlaloc again. Probably the same person who burned sage at midnight and startled your ducks into poetic formation. You water the new rows gently, using your carved gourd. The water trickles over the chili seeds, disappearing into the soil like a blessing you hope gets read. Then, to finish, you carve a spiral into the soil near the center of the chinampa, a pattern you've seen in the marketplace on painted pots and seed jars. It's said to represent movement, growth, and continuity. Or maybe it's just decorative. Either way, it feels right. You sit beside it, damp from work but warmed by sun, and the smug satisfaction of cosmic cooperation. Your garden isn't just aligned with the seasons. It's aligned with something deeper, something ancient, something that might not always answer but definitely listens. The ducks stir, quacking gently as they waddle back toward your squash. One pauses, glances at your new planting rows, and sits directly on your best chili patch. You sigh. Cosmic balance, it seems, always includes a little chaos. The air smells like tortilla ash, mint, and something earthy you can't quite name. Maybe it's the beans. Maybe it's you. Either way, it's a good smell, one that settles in the back of your nose and says, yes, this is life. Today, your chinampa is buzzing, not with bees, though they do visit occasionally, but with voices. Women from neighboring plots have gathered nearby, weaving baskets, swapping seeds, and telling stories that start in farming and end in romance, scandal, or tortilla recipes that may or may not summon rainfall. You drift closer in your canoe, holding a bundle of maize leaves you're not quite sure what to do with. One of the women waves you over. She's older, wearing a tunic so patched it might qualify as a quilt. Her eyes twinkle like someone who knows 50 kinds of chili and 50 more secrets. You join them at the edge of her chinampa. She pats a spot beside her. Sit, she says. You smell like good soil. That's a compliment. You smile, sit, and listen. They speak in Nahuatl, switching occasionally into casual gestures when your vocabulary falters. You're not here for a formal lesson. You're here to learn the way people always have, by being around people who already know. They show you how to braid fibers from maguey plants into ropes and nets, strong enough to lift gourds or lower water jars. One woman pulls out a pouch of dried beans, so dark they shine blue in the sun. These, she says, are good for trade, but they're also good for stories. She tells one about a girl who plants beans in a canoe, drifts too far, and finds herself in a village that only exists during eclipses. You're not sure what the moral is, but you know better than to interrupt a good ghost story with logic. Then, they move on to seeds. The elder shows you how she stores hers, in gourd, halves in folded leaves in little clay pots sealed with wax. She sings softly as she handles them, naming them one by one. Not scientifically, affectionately, like naming children or long-lost pets. You try it. You hold a chili seed and give it a name. Kikatl. Song. Why not? Historians still debate the full extent of women's roles in Chinampa agriculture. Some texts elevate them as domestic cultivators. Others suggest they held deep agronomic knowledge passed matrilineally through generations. But sitting here now, you don't feel ambiguity. You feel expertise, quiet, practiced, and peppered with laughter. They teach you how to plant using your palm as a guide. 1 finger's depth for beans, 2 for maize. They explain when to water by how the leaves droop. Not wilting, just slouching. They crush herbs and rub them between their fingers to check oil content. If it smells too sweet, one says, it's hiding something. You absorb this like sunlight. Not everything makes immediate sense, but all of it feels like truth. And then, tortillas. Someone pulls out a bundle wrapped in cloth, still warm, slightly charred edges, thick and soft, with that corn aroma that makes you forget time. They're filled with squash blossoms and a green paste that numbs your tongue in a pleasing, mysterious way. You eat quietly, feeling like you've joined a club that didn't need applications, just patience and dirt under your nails. The conversation drifts into lullabies. Not for children. Well, not just for children. These are for seeds, for soil, for scaring off weevils. One woman sings while patting down a basket of amaranth. Another hums as she weaves a reed mat for drying peppers. You try to hum along, but mostly you just smile and watch the way their hands move. Everything they do is part of a cycle. A story. A rhythm older than conquest, kings, or even maize itself. As the sun begins to lower, you return to your chinampa carrying a new pouch of seeds, a flat stone for grinding herbs, and a piece of advice. Don't plant when you're angry. Plants listen. You sit at the edge of your plot, feeling the cool mud through your toes and the soft hum of women's voices still echoing in your ears. And you whisper a little thanks, not just to the garden, but to the hands that taught you how to speak its language. The morning begins with a strange breeze, warm, herbal, and oddly minty. You sit up, sniff, and realize someone nearby is burning something. Not firewood, not tortillas. No. This is the scent of crushed herbs and sun-dried leaves, bundled into little rolls and set alight like incense. Welcome to the botanical side of Chinampa life, where mud meets medicine, and your squash plant might double as a painkiller. You paddle over to the source, careful not to knock your ducks into the canal. A woman, younger than most farmers you've seen, sits cross-legged at the edge of her garden, grinding herbs on a stone metate with the casual precision of someone who's done it since she had baby teeth. You greet her, and she nods without looking up. Her hands move in circles, slow and firm, as she crushes dried leaves into a dusty green powder. You've got basil there? You ask. She smirks. Basil? No. Epazote, minty. Keeps your stomach from starting a war. You sit, and she begins to explain. Her garden is more pharmacy than pantry. Yes, she grows food, but just as often she cultivates cures. That fuzzy plant over there? Good for coughs. Those purple flowers? Rub them on a bee sting. The spiky, one that looks like it might eat your fingers? It's for making your mother-in-law slightly dizzy when she visits. Joking, mostly. You start to recognize a few herbs, not by name. Those still blur in your brain, but by scent, texture, behavior. The one with sticky leaves that always clings to your shirt? That's used for fevers. The vine you keep pulling out of your squash rose helps with inflammation. Naturally. She hands you a small bowl. Inside is a paste that smells like eucalyptus and regret. You touch it to your temple and feel a cool sting. Headache, she says. Or too much sun. Or marriage. You laugh, and she grins. Chinampa farming wasn't limited to growing calories. It was also about growing care. The Aztecs had an intricate understanding of plant medicine, much of it passed orally, told in stories, chants, even jokes. And while some of the knowledge made it into codices, most of it lives in hands and memory. Historians still argue how much Aztec medicine was empirically effective versus spiritually symbolic. But when your joints ache and a leaf poultice makes you feel better, who needs a peer-reviewed journal? She invites you to walk her garden. You notice that her planting style is looser, less rigid than yours. Herbs sprout between corn stalks, flowers curl around chili stems. It's chaos, but careful chaos. Each plant supports another, repels pests, balances energy. It's a kind of living choreography, soft and wild. She kneels to show you how to prepare atlil topatli, a black paste made from charred roots, used to treat insect bites and supposedly bad dreams. She smears a little on your wrist, just in case you angered the duck spirits. You take notes mentally. That bushy plant? Good for sore throats. The low-growing moss? Excellent for calming upset stomachs. The thick succulent? Avoid unless you enjoy hallucinating your grandparents yelling at you. Before you leave, she gives you a woven pouch with 3 dried bundles. Her starter kit, she calls it. Plant near your beans. They'll grow better if they think you're looking out for them. You thank her and paddle home, now aware of how painfully boring your chinampa smells in comparison. Determined, you dig a small trench beside your chili patch and carefully plant one of the herbal bundles, dried wormwood and a pinch of something that smells like licorice and thunder. You whisper a little chant as you cover it with soil, not because you believe it will change the weather, but because it feels polite, like introducing new roommates to your ducks. You spend the rest of the day gathering wild herbs from canal banks. You transplant a few. Tuck some into corners. Nestle one near your compost pile just to see what it does. That night, as stars pierce, the sky and frogs begin their orchestra. Your chinampa breathes differently. It smells sweeter, sharper, slightly more awake, and you lie back, wrist still tingling faintly from the paste, wondering what else the mud knows that you don't. You wake to a splash. Not the gentle kind. This one has intent, urgency, and probably feathers. You sit up fast enough to spook a frog off your foot. Something's wrong. Your ducks are squawking like tiny, furious guards. Chief Quack is pacing the edge of your chinampa like a general preparing for battle. There's movement in the canal. You crawl toward the edge and peer into the reeds. Then you see it, someone's boat. Small, quiet, and very much not yours. Garden theft? Not the romantic kind where someone borrows a few chili peppers to spice up their stew. No, this is a raid. A classic, midnight-style, canoe-hopping, gourd-grabbing sneak attack. And you've just interrupted it. The figure in the boat notices you and freezes. For a moment, you both stare at each other, neither quite sure what's appropriate etiquette in a situation involving unauthorized amaranth extraction. You stand slowly. The thief doesn't move. Then, in a move that feels halfway between negotiation and bravado, you reach for the nearest thing, a mud-covered gourd. You hold it up threateningly, though it wobbles in your grip. The message is clear. Not today, Bean Bandit. The intruder paddles backward, fast and awkward, vanishing into the shadows of the neighboring chinampas. You sigh, heart pounding. Chief Quack lets out a victorious squawk. clearly taking full credit for the defense. Raids like this aren't unheard of. With so many chinampas packed together, borders blur, especially at night. And when crops are thriving, envy has a way of drifting in like mist. Historians note that while the Aztec Empire had laws against theft, enforcement on the lakes was flexible. The chinampas were partly communal, partly individual. If your neighbor's squash vine wanders into your maize row, is it theft or divine redistribution? You spend the morning reinforcing the edges of your chinampa, not with weapons or fences. You're not running a fortress, but with reeds and small, prickly bushes that make sneaking around slightly more inconvenient. You also hang a few dried chili bundles from a pole. Whether they act as a warning or a welcome depends on your visitor's spice tolerance. Later, a neighbor paddles. Over. He saw the intruder too. Or maybe he just heard your ducks shouting into the wind. He offers a suggestion. Mark your borders with floating flowers, not just for beauty. Certain petals are sacred. Touching them without permission is said to bring bad luck, or toothaches. No one's eager to find out which. You thank him and gather blooms from nearby canals. Marigolds, hibiscus, a few odd red things that might be decorative or cursed. You anchor them along the edges of your chinampa, tied gently to the willows. Now your garden has a border made of blossoms, a kind of soft perimeter that says, I see you, but I'm still fabulous. You plant a few decoy gourds too, small, underdeveloped, and not even very tasty. If another raider comes, they'll grab those and leave the good ones. Hopefully. You tell yourself it's clever. Your ducks seem unconvinced. By afternoon, peace returns. The sun glints off the canal, and the herons resume their fishing like nothing happened. You replant a few beans disturbed in the ruckus. One squash vine took a hit. It's bruised, but defiant. You sit with it, whispering a little encouragement. Plants, like people, bounce back better when someone believes in them, or at least hums in their direction. The lake is quiet again. You watch dragonflies skim the surface, weaving trails through the golden light. The flowers at the edges of your chinampa drift gently, tethered but free. And as dusk settles in, you light a small torch, more symbolic than functional. A sign that this garden is watched, cared for, and not to be plundered without consequence. Or, at the very least, not without hearing a very angry duck first. The torch you lit last night still smolders faintly as dawn rises. A thin trail of smoke spirals upward, mingling with the mist. Your garden, despite the late-night drama, looks calm. Squash sprawling like sleepy cats, beans hugging their maize stalks like old friends, and your ducks snoring in a pile that smells faintly of algae and victory. Today, you paddle toward the city. Tenochtitlan gleams in the morning light, rising from the lake like something too symmetrical to be real. Stone temples, bustling marketplaces, ceremonial platforms, all connected by canals and causeways. But you're not going for sightseeing. You're going to the market, and you're bringing the fruits of your muddy labor. You load up the canoe carefully. 3 squashes, each round and proud, a bundle of maize ears, their husks tied with bright thread, a cluster of chili peppers that look mildly threatening in the best way, and, just for flair, a sprig of flowers tied to the bow of the boat. You push off, the canoe gliding silently across the glassy canal. The chinampas slowly fall behind, their willows waving like sleepy sentinels. The air smells of early cooking fires, damp stone, and anticipation. As you enter the city's web of canals, traffic increases. Other canoes pass you by, some piled, high with avocados, others with textiles, a few with turkeys that look deeply offended by the whole situation. One particularly elegant canoe carries nothing but pottery and a woman playing a wooden flute, because apparently, even trade requires ambiance. You arrive at the marketplace, A sprawling, floating plaza, lined with vendor rafts, shore stalls, and shouting. So much shouting. It's not angry, just assertive. Each seller wants to be heard. Over there, someone is haggling over cacao beans. Here, a man is trading a small idol for enough salt to season a generation of tortillas. You find a spot between a basket weaver and a boy selling tamales the size of your forearm. You set up your display on a reed mat. Squash in the front, maize in neat rows, chilies stacked like spicy pyramids. People wander by. Some glance. Some sniff. One elderly woman lifts a squash, shakes it near her ear like it's a maraca, nods approvingly, and places 2 beans in your palm. High praise. You trade steadily through the morning. Maize goes fast. Everyone wants fresh cobs this week. The chilies attract a group of teenagers who dare each other to lick one. 2 fail spectacularly. You offer them a leaf from your new herb pouch, cooling, minty. They accept with tearful gratitude. You chat with other sellers. One man offers you dried fish in exchange for one of your gourds. Another proposes a trade. Your best squash for a small carved idol of Xilonin, goddess of young maize. You accept, placing the figurine carefully at the edge of your basket. She watches over your wares like a tiny, stoic cashier. You even meet a few Chinampa veterans who ask about your layout, how you layered your soil, whether your ducks prefer chili leaves or mint. You exchange notes, stories, and recipes that involve alarming amounts of beans. Historians marvel at the scale of Aztec food systems, and here you see why. The Chinampas weren't just floating gardens. They were logistical marvels feeding a vast, dense city without the help of wheels, horses, or supermarkets. Canoes glided from field to market. Knowledge moved from elder to novice. And food never traveled farther than a paddle's length. By noon, you've traded away most of your goods. You pack your few remaining items, a bent squash, 2 slightly limp chilies, and a lot of pride, and begin the slow paddle home. On the way back, you stop by a shrine tucked between 2 Chinampas. It's small, shaded, and smells like marigold and whetstone. You offer 1 ear of maize, placing it on the worn stone slab with quiet hands. A thank you, not just to the gods, but to the garden, the lake, and even the rude turtle who keeps digging up your chili roots. Back home, your ducks greet you with a mix of indignation and hunger. You feed them a handful of traded grains and receive pecks of approval. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows over the lake, you look at your Chinampa, not just as a garden, but as part of something vast. A system, a city, an empire built not just on war or stone, but on mud, maize, and morning markets. You place the little idol of Xilonin at the head of your maize row. She stands firm in the soft soil, expression unreadable, but you think she approves. The moon hangs low, casting silver light across your Chinampa like spilled milk. You're up before the sun this time, not because you're virtuous, but because something rustled in the squash patch and your imagination has a habit of adding claws to everything. You investigate with a reed torch in hand and your bravest. Duck at your heels. No monster. Just a broken gourd and a trail of muddy footprints. They're not yours. Your Chinampa has been raided. Again. But this time you're not surprised. Harvest is near, and ripe crops are like treasure glinting in the dark. And floating gardens, with no walls or doors, are tempting targets for desperate hands or competitive neighbors. You examine the scene like a crime drama. Half a chili plant missing, a pile of trampled amaranth, and 1 very confused snail sitting on a squashed squash. You pat the snail reassuringly. We all have bad nights, you say. This kind of raid isn't just frustrating, it's a real threat. A few gourds lost here and there, sure. But if they start targeting your maize, you'll lose more than food. You'll lose trade, status, and that glorious feeling of handing someone a chili they can't handle. You paddle out to check with neighbors. Some are awake, some still snoring into woven mats. One woman grumbles that her entire chili row was stolen, again. Another points to muddy streaks along her willows. A few of them even claim to know who's responsible, naming a rival village to the south with a history of accidental trespassing. Historians often gloss over the petty, almost comical rivalries between Chinampa zones. But oral traditions hint at it. Stories of farmers hiding gourds underwater, or pretending their maize got sick to deter thieves. One tale involves a man training a goose to scream whenever someone touched his squash. You start to consider geese as a backup plan. You return home and inspect the rest of your crops. Most are fine. The maize still stands tall, beans curling around them like loyal vines. Your ducks seem insulted that the thief didn't even try to bribe them with snacks. You decide it's time for defenses. First, you build a low reed fence along the Chinampa's outer edge. It won't stop a determined thief, but it'll make things noisy. You weave bits of dried chili pods into it, just in case spice-based deterrence works on humans. Next, decoys. You craft a few fake gourds out of bundled reeds, covered in clay, and painted with leftover herb paste. They smell wrong. They feel wrong, but they look just enough like real squash to lure a lazy thief into stealing disappointment. Then, a noise trap. You string a line of hollowed reeds along the edge of your plot, loosely tied with fibers. If someone trips it, they'll knock over a pile of pebbles and clay bowls. Not lethal, not even painful, but enough to cause a ruckus and hopefully shame. The final touch? A sign, painted with mud and chili on a broad leaf. You write in your best attempt at intimidation. These squash bite. It's unclear whether it's effective, but your ducks seem to approve. That night, you sit near the edge of your Chinampa, keeping watch. The stars shimmer in the lake's reflection. You hear distant flute music, soft paddles slicing through, water, the occasional splash of a fishing net, and then movement. You stay still, barely breathing. A canoe glides near. Too close. Your trap springs. A loud clatter, a quack of outrage, and a splash. You run to the edge just in time to see a bay, shape paddling away, soaked, humiliated, and holding what you assume is one of your decoy gourds. You grin. No one was hurt. No one fought. But your message was clear. This Chinampa doesn't sleep anymore. In the days that follow, the raids stop. Word spreads. Your chili plants recover. Your maize grows another hand taller. And one of your neighbors offers to trade you a goose. You decline. For now. As dusk settles in once more, you light a single torch and set it in the water near your border. It floats, glowing softly like a guardian spirit. Your garden is safe. Your squash are smug. And your ducks? Still the loudest alarm system in the Empire. It starts with a rumble, not the kind that makes you run for cover. At least not yet. It's low, distant, and somehow wet-sounding, like the lake is clearing its throat. You glance skyward. Clouds, thick, slow, and the exact shade of something's coming. Your Chinampa's willows rustle uneasily, and Chief Quack waddles into his shelter like he's seen this episode before. You've entered the flood season. Rain in Lake Texcoco doesn't arrive politely. It doesn't trickle in with delicate droplets and soft breezes. No, when the rains come, they come with drums and fanfare, like a visiting noble who expects every head to bow, including yours. You prepare quickly. First, the perimeter. You check the edges of your Chinampa, reinforcing any soggy spots with fresh reeds and more of that magical lake mud. You drag over extra willow branches, stacking them like little shields against the storm. One vine near your bean row has collapsed in protest. You prop it up with a forked stick and a whispered apology. Next, you paddle to the neighboring Chinampa run by the woman who sings to her marigolds. She greets you mid-chant and hands over a bundle of taro leaves. For runoff, she says, and for wrapping tamales if we survive. You return and dig tiny drainage channels along your plot. Gutter paths that lead overflow water back into the canal instead of turning your maize roots into a swampy spa. The ducks follow you, curious. Pato Supreme tries to dig his own channel. You praise his initiative. Then, it hits. Not all at once, but enough to make you drop your paddle and cover your head. The sky opens like a curtain torn in a fit of thunderous drama. Rain pounds the surface of the lake, turning it into boiling silver. The air smells of wet stone, ozone, and every herb you forgot to harvest. Your chinampa rocks, but it holds. The willows sway like dancers, their roots gripping the soil below like determined fingers. Water spills across the surface but drains, away through your carefully carved trenches. The system works, mostly. One corner begins to sink, just slightly. You rush over and reinforce it with reeds, whispering motivational speeches to the soil. You're strong. You're fabulous. You will not dissolve on me. Historians often note how the Chinampa system excelled at flood management, using the lake's natural rise and fall to nourish crops. But what they sometimes miss is how individual farmers dealt with the chaos. Fast thinking, communal support, and a deeply ingrained belief that mud can solve almost anything. The rain continues all day. At one point, a canoe drifts past with no one paddling it, just a soaked dog glaring from under a gourd bowl. You tip your hat. Evening brings a pause. The storm, like a performer exiting stage left, leaves behind a hushed world. Your garden is soggy, but intact. The maize stands tall, beads of water clinging to its leaves like diamonds. The squash vines look a little smug, as if enjoying the mud bath, and the ducks, absolutely thriving. Chief Quack leads the others in celebratory puddle stomping. You survey the damage. Not bad. A few bean vines need retying. One corner might need rebuilding. But overall, the Chinampa lives. You light a fire on a floating clay dish and boil a handful of amaranth with herbs gifted during your last seed swap. The steam smells like pepper and cinnamon. You sip, and your shoulders finally relax. Tomorrow, you'll repair what needs fixing. You'll check your neighbors, share some chili paste, maybe trade for a stronger paddle. But for tonight, you sit beneath the willows, listening to the last drips of rain slide from leaf to leaf, like a lullaby whispered in wet syllables. And somewhere nearby, a frog starts singing. You join in, just a little. The storm is gone, but it leaves behind a sky that's impossibly blue, like someone polished it with a maize husk and divine patience. The air feels washed, cleaner, softer, tinged with the scent of damp earth and the sweet decay of last night's leaves. Your Chinampa breathes deeply. You do too. Today is not for repairs. Today is for ceremony. You're not quite sure what kind yet, but your neighbor from 2 rafts over is already in full regalia. Face painted, wearing a feathered cloak so large it could shade an entire maize row. She nods as you pass, motioning toward a clay bowl filled with dried seeds. "It's the seed remembering," she says, as if that explains everything. You paddle closer, and soon you see others gathering, each carrying something small: seeds, herbs, water, even a tiny fish in a net that looks slightly annoyed to be involved. It's festival prep, but not the kind with dancers and crowds. This one is quieter, older, and held right here on the Chinampas. A day to bless the seeds planted weeks ago, to offer thanks for their stubbornness, and to encourage them to finish strong. You fetch your own offering, a bundle of dried chili stems, a gourd painted with a spiraling maize pattern, and one bean that grew in a shape so strange you're convinced it's some kind of deity's joke. Everyone gathers on the largest Chinampa in the cluster, a ceremonial platform kept mostly bare, save for a few willows and a small mossy shrine. At its center, it doesn't look like much, but it hums with energy, the kind that makes you lower your voice and walk a little softer. The ritual begins. Seeds are passed from hand to hand, each carrier whispering something. Prayers, wishes, crop gossip, maybe a little weather-based sarcasm. The air fills with a low chant. You don't know all the words, but the rhythm is easy to follow, like the slow lapping of lake water against a canoe hull. A woman begins placing seeds in a circle around the shrine. Maize at the north, beans to the east, squash south, and chilies west. Each direction means something. Strength, nourishment, protection, and, of course, spice. The four corners of a proper meal and a proper life. You kneel beside your neighbors, adding your bean, your gourd, your stems. You say nothing. But in your head, you thank your plants for putting up with your mistakes, your ducks for not trampling, everything, and the lake for not swallowing your garden whole. Historians still puzzle over the blend of agricultural technique and spiritual ritual in Chinampa culture. Was it superstition? Was it a clever way to schedule planting? Or was it both, faith wrapped in function? The answer likely lies somewhere in the mud between. The ceremony ends not with a grand finale, but with food. Small offerings, tamales, wrapped in taro leaves, roasted chilies, and flat cakes made of amaranth and honey, are passed around. You sit under a willow and nibble one, still warm. It's nutty, a little sticky, and so satisfying it makes your toes uncurl. Later you're handed a small bundle, 5 new seeds wrapped in dried flower petals. They're not labeled, that's the point. You're to plant them on the next listening moon, a phase known for growth, change, and quiet transformation. No one knows what the seeds will grow into, but everyone agrees they'll be useful. You. Paddle home slowly, the bundle tucked into your tunic like treasure. Back on your chinampa, you plant them in a corner by the canal, near where the ducks like to gossip. You mark the spot with a twist of reeds and a whisper of today's chant. You sit back, full of food, and the kind of calm that only comes after collective quiet. Your garden looks the same, but it feels different, like it knows it was seen, acknowledged, maybe even celebrated. You hum a bit as you pat down the soil, wondering what those seeds will become. Maize? Herbs? Squash shaped like a screaming toad? Doesn't matter. It's the planting that counts. The wind has changed. Not dramatically. No trumpets or ominous clouds, but subtly. A different kind of breeze drifts over the lake now, cooler, edged with the scent of something unfamiliar. You paddle to the edge of your chinampa and squint across the water. There's movement on the far side. Canoes you don't recognize. Colors you've never seen. And a murmur, like a question no one's quite ready to ask aloud. Rumors ripple through the canals. Some say strangers have arrived at the coast, pale-skinned and armored, riding beasts too big to be dogs and too small to be gods. Others say they carry thunder in their hands, speak like they're chewing gravel, and have no idea how to steer a canoe. Still others claim it's nonsense, just traders from a new region with shiny clothes and even shinier stories. But the tone is different now. There's a weight in the air, like the lake itself is holding its breath. You focus on your work. That's what gardeners do when the world begins to tremble. They dig deeper into the soil. You inspect your maize, now shoulder high and whispering with purpose. The beans curl around them like they're whispering encouragement. Your squash vines have started producing so aggressively that you've begun giving them names and ranking, them in terms of attitude. You notice more birds than usual circling overhead. The egrets, the herons. They're fidgety, restless. The frogs don't sing quite as much at night. Then one evening, a neighbor passes your chinampa in a hurry. He stops only to say, "They're in the city now, the strangers." Tenochtitlan. You feel the weight of the word. The city is the heart. If new blood is entering that heart, then the whole body of the empire might start to pulse differently. Historians write of this moment as one of awe and confusion, when the Aztec capital welcomed Cortez and his band, with gifts, suspicions, and the deepest kind of unease. Some thought he was Quetzalcoatl returned. Others thought he was just lost and underdressed for the climate. Back on your chinampa, the news buzzes like a mosquito in your ear. You try to ignore it. You turn your compost. You sing to your chilies. You give the ducks an extra helping of weeds in case diplomacy breaks down and everyone has to flee by canoe. But you can't stop watching the horizon. More canoes. More strangers. They don't look like traders. They move like people who think everything they see is theirs already. You hear stories from market vendors who've seen the strangers up close. Their metal skins, their fire sticks, their awkward hunger. They don't know what maize is. They refuse tamales. They bring beads and mirrors and diseases with no visible symptoms but strange, lingering coughs. Still, life continues on the chinampas, for now. The maize doesn't pause for politics. The squash doesn't worry about conquest. The ducks, oblivious and magnificent, continue to quack at egrets and chase insects with full-throated authority. You add more layers to your soil. You reinforce your borders. You hide a few extra seeds in a pouch tied beneath your tunic, just in case, and you wait, because the lake remembers everything. Time frays like the edge of an old reed mat. The strangers are no longer rumors. They're fixtures now, occupying corners of Tenochtitlan like uninvited cousins who arrived for a meal and never left. Their voices echo through the city, sharp and wrong-sounding. The marketplace grows quieter. The gods, at least the ones who reside in casual glances and whispered prayers, feel farther away. You stay on your chinampa. For now. The garden is still growing, because plants are loyal in a way people sometimes forget. Your maize has reached its final height, tassels turning golden and heavy with future. The beans hang like ornaments, shy but generous. Even the chilies, always dramatic, seem to sense that this may be their last best season. But the canals have changed. Trade slows. Canoes pass with fewer goods and more glances over shoulders. You hear rumors whispered like wind through reeds. Temples burned, idols shattered, names of gods replaced with foreign syllables and hollow promises. And then, the sickness. It comes quietly at first. A cough here, a fever there. Someone too, tired to paddle. Then the absences begin. Neighbors who vanish into their huts and never come back out. You don't know what it's called. Neither do the strangers. But it spreads faster than gossip, and it doesn't care whether your squash is ripe. You try to keep farming. You clean your hands with herbs. You burn mint in shallow bowls. You make tea from every plant that once helped with fevers, even the bitter ones that taste like disappointment and overcooked amaranth. You hum lullabies to your beans. Not for them, for you. Historians record this time with numbers, thousands dead, whole communities lost, but they don't always write about the silence that followed. The stillness. The way a chinampa feels when no one comes to harvest. Your ducks stay close now. They're quieter, too. Chief Quack rarely strays from your feet. You feed him by hand and pretend he doesn't understand. The maize is ready, but no one comes to trade. You pick what you can, dry it in bundles beneath the willow shade. You store seeds in clay jars, wrapping each one like a secret. Not because you think the world will end, but because you hope someone, someday, will need to begin again. The willows sway, the frogs stop singing. Even the lake seems to hold back. One day, you paddle past a cluster of chinampas that used to belong to a family of 5. The plots are overgrown. Squash vines tangle with duckweed. Maize stalks stand unharvested, golden and grieving. You pause, and for a moment, you cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the quiet kind of crying that sneaks up while you're tying a reed bundle and suddenly can't remember why. You return to your garden. You water the soil with care. You hum a song the seed women taught you. You whisper to the herbs, "Grow anyway." You don't know what's next. No one does. But the chinampa remains, floating, waiting. A patch of earth cradled by water, stitched with roots and hope and the stubborn memory of everything it once held. Years pass, though you don't count them the same anymore. No one rings, a bell to mark the seasons. The marketplace fell silent long ago, overtaken by strangers who don't speak your language. Or the lakes. The canals still hold water, but they don't shimmer the way they used to. Even the birds fly differently now, hesitant and low, as if they too are unsure what comes next. Your chinampa still floats. It's smaller now, not in size, but in spirit. Many nearby have been abandoned, swallowed back into the lake or paved over by the creeping sprawl of stone and dust that came with the new rulers. The city on the horizon has changed. More walls, more metal, fewer songs. But your garden remains. You walk its length every day, barefoot, feeling the soil beneath you like a pulse. The maize no longer grows in perfect rows. Some seasons it doesn't grow at all, but the willows still sway, roots knotted deep into memory. The ducks are gone, flown or taken. You never asked which, yet something keeps you here. Sometimes children come, rare, quiet, eyes wide. They paddle awkwardly, not knowing the old routes, bumping into submerged things best left unnamed. They ask questions. What is this? How does it float? Why do the plants grow sideways? You show them, not because you think they'll remember, but because someone once showed you. You press seeds into their palms, wrapped in dried petals. You explain how to layer the soil, how to ask the lake for patience. You tell them to talk to the squash, not because it helps the plant, but because it helps you. One of them calls your chinampa a ghost. You laugh. Maybe, you say, but it still grows tomatoes. The city encroaches. The lake shrinks. The canals narrow like veins forgotten by the body they once fed. Some days, you're the only canoe drifting at dawn, and yet, the chinampa holds. You plant fewer things now, mostly herbs, resilient, stubborn, ones that need little water and no praise. You let wildflowers take over the southern edge. Bees return, tentative at first, then bolder. You hum as you work, not songs from the temples, they're gone, but songs from the earth, songs the soil wrote. Historians rarely mention what became of the last chinampas. They focus on conquest, collapse, the tidy before and after of empires. But if they listened carefully, beneath the stone, the streets, the ticking clocks, they'd hear something else. A rustle, a whisper, the quiet breath of mud remembering. One evening, as the sky bruises with sunset, you sit at the edge of your raft, toes in the water, hands muddy, heart still stitched to the lake like a root, and you whisper, not a prayer, just a name. The name of the first seed you planted, the name only your chinampa still remembers. And now, as our journey drifts to its close, you find yourself reclining gently, not on a raft of reeds, but on the soft weight of everything you've imagined. Tonight, the chinampa fades behind you. The last light over Lake Texcoco dissolves into a velvet dusk. The water smooths out like silk, the wind softens, and even the frogs seem to whisper now, not sing. You feel the mud between your fingers. Not messy, not cold, but warm and grounding. A reminder that even in the most unlikely places, floating gardens, fading cities, forgotten corners of history, something beautiful, something living, once thrived. Let your breath slow here. In and out. Gentle as a paddle dipping into still water. You've walked through rainstorms, planted seeds in sacred spirals, bartered chilies for stories, and whispered lullabies to beans. And through it all, the garden held you. So let it hold you still. Float now on that image of willows swaying, maize rustling in warm breezes, and stars blinking over a sleeping lake. Let yourself be quiet. Let yourself be still. Let the chinampa cradle you. You are not lost. You are simply drifting. And somewhere beneath it all, a seed waits. Softly, silently, growing. If that doesn't leave you awestruck, check your pulse. Because what you've just witnessed isn't just farming, it's poetry written in mud and sun. The Aztecs didn't just plant crops. They planted resilience, memory, and the quiet kind of brilliance that still ripples beneath modern Mexico's streets. If this glimpse into ancient genius moved you, even just a little, tap that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in human creativity again. Drop a comment. Which part of Aztec ingenuity blew your mind the most? And don't forget to subscribe, because history isn't just about the past. It's about what still grows when everything else disappears.